I never had an intention of doing this work. My struggles with drugs and alcohol in the early 90s sort of got me on a track to sort of be compelled to have to look at myself. And as I moved through my life, um, around, around early 2000, I felt I was now interested in becoming a teacher. I ended up going to University of South Dakota to get a graduate degree, a master's degree in English. Part of my journey, my healing journey, the journey of me sort of transformational journey, included going to a couple of counselors back in 99 through 2004. That sort of introduced me to the therapy world, let's say, and then I formally began studies to get a master's degree in counseling, which I finished in 2016. What's been important for me is I've always been someone curious, again, of the human drama, how people move through the world. Somehow or another, I've connected to people who have suffered a lot, and I think the 12-step program introduced me to the idea of helping each other, guiding each other, in that I seem to always end up in positions of training others, being in a leadership position, and that was a part of understanding my ability to communicate to others in a way that sort of put me in a quasi-leadership position to help others. One of my many things that I find troublesome about the current culture is there aren't those ways that are as widespread in the culture to seek things out. Coaching would be one. That's a little more formal. I've seen for most of my life when I initially got into recovery from my addictions, because prior to that I really didn't recognize the value of that. I did not. That really opened my eyes to the power of having someone like that, a sponsor or somebody that could be a guide. I like to tell people that not everybody gets the call, so to speak. Not everybody gets the tap on the shoulder to, hey, it's your turn. Some people never get it. One of the things that I've learned in the 12 steps is this isn't necessarily for people that need it. It's for people that want it. Although sometimes people get there because they need it and some force outside themselves wakes them up. I mean, I've worked with people as young as 18, and I've worked with people who are as old as 83. Anybody who sort of gets the call or the tap, whether they want to be doing it or not, I've been fortunate enough to work with them, and they've turned, in some degree, being open to how they want to be different. And that's what intrigues me. And literature was really the first place that I started to be able to kind of chew on that. I have a particular interest in Russian authors like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and the short stories from Chekhov, and then sort of moving into literature, American literature. But that was a big window into seeing things in the longer term. I've also done some readings of and understandings of Greek literature, Greek poetry, and then of course I've sort of picked up a lot of momentum in my spiritual journey, so to speak, which has deepened the sense that culture impacts us. I worked in a domestic abuse program for 5 years, and I was curious about the condition of men and the paths that men have taken. And I have learned through my studies and through my experience that men and women have had different types of paths. And they've both been obligated, and sometimes it's been enforced to certain prescribed roles. Those paths can be narrow on both ends. It does cause a different degree of ways people experience pain, suffering. And I attempt to work with the individuals, but when you're working in larger groups, you start to see things shake out. And this also starts to touch on some of what I do believe are the brain differences in some of these things I've read. There's enough of a difference to make a difference, but there's a universality of human suffering. And it just may look a little different with different people. It may look more, different at the tails, or for men and women, for trans folks, for gays, for lesbians. There is a universal suffering, I believe. And then there are the other parts of that. So I think it's part of the human condition to have some suffering, then degrees of suffering. And I think most major spiritual disciplines accept that, and the path is towards liberation and freedom from the suffering. It would be getting to a place of peace and to being able to see life is about the challenges, the adversity, which can cause suffering and pain, and learning to experience pain that's more organic in the process of growth, in the process of experiencing life. Pain comes from people suddenly dying. Things happen suddenly in our lives. I do think that there's a lot of pain that we get caught up in, and we almost become attached to it, and we almost seek it because it's the only way we feel alive. If you have serious difficulties in life, we're always reacting. Birth is a reaction to life that is difficult. We carry these things through life, and depending the degree of the difficulties, the reactions change, and we store them within ourselves. We store them in our body. Our mind takes them in. And then there's pain from being a victim of sorts, definitely a victim, and things that we didn't expect to happen to us. And I've learned from my practice of technique and meditation is grasping to stay tethered to that particular process is going to limit the process. We're going to get into, at some point pretty quickly, sort of some form of universality of their experience of suffering and pain, and sort of the notion of their inability to control circumstances, their inability to always feel safe, and it's going to trip into sort of a more spiritual realm where they're going to be looking at true transformation and hopefully finding a purpose, a vision, which they may never have had, or they have, and it needs to be refined at points. Ultimately, and this was a big teaching for me for both my meditation and my 12-step world experience for sure, and some of my Judaism background and some of my Christian background, but how do we create compassion and participate in communities of places where are we going to be of service? Where are we going to be of use? More and more people who stay with me, they want a deeper connection to something beyond themselves. And they have been either never exposed to religious structures, which can be too constraining, or ones that they never had anything. But I help them understand, at least if they're going to work with me, that I'm not in this alone. It's not self-will. It's not a self-reverential process. I am not the center. I am part of all. I want to make it clear that I'm not a Buddhist, yet the meditation that I've done is framed around Buddhist concepts and notions that I found very helpful. They've also come from my 12-step experience. And yes, I have learned a few things as a therapist in my training and education, but it does fascinate me and astonish me that I can be working within a tradition of meditation and a healing and a process of liberation from our human suffering at times from something that's been around for 2,600 years. When I start with someone, I'm more and more trying to understand the context of where they're coming in with me, and I'll work with them initially on learning a bit of their story. What are they coming in with? What are their so to speak, complaints, or where are the places they're not functioning or operating more fully in their own life. And then I'll start generally, depending on the situation, with a bit of their history, just to get understanding of what patterns they might picked up, emotional patterns of the mind, patterns of emotions, patterns of physical reactions, to get a little more on the ground understanding of how they've walked through life enough. And we start that process, and it's very spontaneous. It's not as linear as I would like it to be. I want to help them, many of them, structure their life. I want to help them create some type of a life. And then part of the work then is to be comfortable with their life. And then after that, it could be their life is now opening up and they're experiencing new challenges that echo old challenges. There's different periods where people are ready at different ways along the path.